So the year 2025 is almost coming to an end, and I would just like to take this opportunity to say thank you for your valuable comments, your criticisms, and your general appreciation for this platform. If you have been an avid follower of this page, you will know for sure that we've covered quite a lot in the year 2025, and we are yet to cover more. And so I would just like to take this opportunity to sum it all up in 5 simple points. So really, first and foremost, I think what I have been emphasizing on is increasing our vegetable intake. If we increased our vegetable intake, you also automatically reduce on the amount of carbohydrates on shima in general, the starchy foods, more easily. The reason why we probably consume a lot more is because we have very little vegetables to talk about. A number of us feel it is much easier to increase protein, especially the more affluent you become. You feel a whole fish is sufficient, or a whole T-bone or whatever. We eat a lot of protein, especially the more affluent we become. So I will not touch that area, but the vegetable portion is the one that is most worrying, because surveys are showing us that a lot of us consume vegetables, but not in sufficient amounts. And so consuming a good portion of vegetable will most likely, and this is me thinking, it will most likely reduce also on the shima intake, because you have upping your fiber intake when you're consuming more vegetables, and therefore more fiber means more satiety. So you feel fuller for a longer time on a smaller portion of nshima. I would rather you have 2 different types of vegetables. It could be a green leafy vegetable, as well as a white vegetable or a red vegetable or any other color, or even if they are both green vegetables, but of different types. So secondly, and I think this is something that we've emphasized throughout the year, reduce your simple sugar intake. Simple sugars is what is causing our blood sugar levels, our insulin resistance, and whatever other diseases that we are experiencing most likely comes from the sugar, and especially simple sugars that we are consuming. The soft drinks, the refined carbohydrates like biscuits and crackers and things like that, especially the older you become. When you're in your 30s, going towards 40s especially, it's more important for you to start being more mindful about what kind of sugar you are consuming. So reduce simple sugar, and this includes the sugar that we add to tea and includes honey. Please, if you are diabetic or trying to control your simple sugars, honey is not the way to go, because at the end of the day, it is still sugar. Simply because we've said honey has added benefits does not mean that it should be taken in excess. I've seen people pouring honey in their tea, forgetting that it is still sugar. It's the same way as taking your normal table sugar and adding it to your tea. We said 5 to 6 teaspoons of sugar is more than sufficient. So do not exceed that amount of simple sugar. Reduce also the amount of refined carbohydrates. If tumbua, ama crackers, ama biscuits, all those contain what we call simple sugars. The sugar that does not have fiber to restrict it from behaving anyhow in the body. So one simple way in which I reduce sugar is to make sure that I do not drink it. So I don't drink simple sugars, or I don't like to drink carbohydrates in general. I prefer to eat or chew my carbohydrates. So one way of doing that is, if I'm going to have a scone or a cake, I would rather not have sugar in the beverage that I'm going to have it with. So I'll have my green tea or whatever, rooibos tea, whatever you like to take, lemongrass tea with a cupcake, but no sugar. So the sugar comes from the cupcake. And so when I bite into the cupcake, I take the tea as well, right? So thirdly, I would say it's important that we increase our food diversity or dietary diversity. Do you know why a lot of you have come in my comments section to say, I cannot eat vegetables anymore. I do not like monk sauce anymore. I don't eat insects. I ate a lot of that. Why are you taking me back to my village days? That is because we lacked diversity. You know, when you eat the same food over and over, it creates fatigue, especially if you don't enjoy it. You are eating it maybe because of There's nothing else to eat due to high poverty levels. That's the only thing that is available. And so the minute you get a little bit affluent, you want to do away with that food. That is most likely the reason why you totally eliminate foods. And unfortunately, you tend to eliminate foods that are high in nutrients simply because you ate too much of it. All of a sudden, it's now food for the poor and you aspire for better foods. But that should not be the case. When we diversify, and there are so many ways in which we can diversify. You diversify within a food group, you diversify across food groups, you also diversify in terms of how the food is prepared. So make sure that there's always that variety. You can't always have boiled chicken. Chicken is good, but when it's always in a boiled form, it creates fatigue, like it's monotonous, right? But you want to roast, you want to grill, you want to cook it in different ways so that you can have it shredded, you can have it in some kind of casserole, have different approaches to preparing foods. It is fun, especially when you do it as a family. Explore different recipes out there to prepare foods, but just ensure that whatever ingredients you are using are natural and are fresh. And then also, this is a big subject, but unfortunately I have to tell you, the serving sizes. When I say reduce this, increase this, people think, no. People want to just eat for the sake of eating. But remember, we eat firstly or primarily for nourishment. And so if it's not nourishing your body, forget it. So serving size is also key. And I think this has been the biggest debate of the year, the serving size, especially when we talk of Nshema. But really, it's something we cannot ignore. If you're going to improve your nutritional status, you have to take care of the serving sizes of the foods that you consume. Mind you, I didn't say portion, I said serving size. There is a difference between portion and serving size. Of course, a serving size is a portion. It's basically a standardized measure of a particular food to guide you in terms of how much calories would be sufficient for you. So looking at a 2,000 kilocalorie diet, for example, which most of us are in that range, of course, others slightly more. So I would say between 2,000 and 3,000 kilocalories is what a number of us require. And so a serving would be something that is measured, that you can say, if I eat this times this is what is sufficient for me. So mind those portions, and I think we'll be talking more about them in the coming 2026, because I really want you to be able to eyeball your food and know that, okay, here I'm consuming so many servings. A portion is simply just a scoop of any food, right? The same way you scoop Nshima. That's a portion. It is not standardized. It is not measured. It will be important that as we go along, we explore this point further, so that we get to know exactly what do we mean by, say, a serving of fruit or a serving of vegetables and so forth. Of course, we've discussed that in the earlier videos, especially the videos. You can go back to the videos where I talked about each of the Zambian food groups. We did touch on servings there, but we'll be going a little deeper in the year 2026. So servings do need to be appropriate for your age, appropriate for your sex, appropriate for your physical activity levels, and also your health condition. What are you currently going through? Is it diabetes? Is it hypertension? Is it whatever? So servings have to be adjusted based on that. And you cannot really do away with being mindful of your servings if you're going to improve your nutritional status. And then lastly, I would like for us to eliminate all foods that have substances that are harmful to our health. It could be in terms of pesticides and herbicides, and also sweeteners, preservatives, and all these things that are added to foods that can cause a lot of harm to our health. So slowly but surely start eliminating them. Of course, it's not everything you have control over. This is something that we have to jointly do as a people, as a globe, because they're harming our environment. I'll talk of fertilizers that contain glyphosate. It's very difficult to control at individual level what foods contain these substances. Even foods that say organic sometimes may be contaminated. But this is why this point is last. It's last because, it's very difficult for us at individual level or household level to have control over them. but if you can eliminate them, you can start by reducing the amount of ultra processed foods that you consume, because it's in these ultra processed foods that a lot of non-food and harmful substances are added. For example, preservatives and colorants and all these things that are added to food to increase their shelf life. Start reducing or avoid completely, if you can, these ultra processed foods. If you remember these 5 things, I think it will be much easier for you to now begin to make those 2026 dietary New Year resolutions. And how to remember these 5 points is by simply memorizing the simple acronym I.R.I.S E, right? I for increased vegetable, R for reduce simple sugars, another I for increasing your food diversity, S for your serving size, remembering that your serving size is very important and needs to be appropriate. And then E for eliminating all harmful substances in food. Of course, I made it last because you may not have full control over what is added to food, especially with these chemicals and herbicides and pesticides and fertilizers and all that. And what you have control over is what you pick in the supermarket. For example, read your food labels. Check that you're not buying foods with excessive colorants and preservatives and all these things. So the shorter the ingredients list on packaged foods, the better. If you have a long ingredients list, that's a food you should totally avoid or consume very seldom. So friend, with that said, we'll chat again later. Compliments of the season.